Good morning, City fans. Well, the content's coming thick and fast, isn't it? We had a Facebook Live yesterday morning on Sean Rowan, which hopefully you found interesting. Not Facebook Live, whatever this is, YouTube live shows. Last night, Chris and I were dropping some Lincoln City related content. We were talking about potential moves for Paudie O'Connor, Sean Rowan's move, reported interest in Denver Hume, which is just newspaper chatter. And then Mark Tracy and Joe Hutchinson. Really briefly, at the end of yesterday's show, we did touch on another news report that had come out. Now, there is an awful lot printed over the summer months. Transfers, players wanted, this happening, that happening. It's like the Wild West. With Jez and Liam, I think last week on our live show that we did at Central Bank, we're talking about the transfer market being like the Wild West at times. It's just teams with big guns seeing who's got the biggest, throwing money around. My understanding is that is still the case. Targets or people that we were interested in going for more money than they're arguably worth at this level. The independent regulator desperately needs to get himself in place. But it is a gold mine of opportunity for people like, hesitate to say me, who work within the football reporting industry. Obviously, I, on behalf of another company, run a website, and we trade on clicks and we trade on news. And if one news outlet puts a story out there, everybody tends to try and follow suit, but trying to get a different angle. It's a bit different with the Stacey West. By the way, I am not somebody that trades in clickbait on Stacey West, because there is no point. That's not the revenue model on the Stacey West. So whilst I have the odd enticing headline to get people to read, I'm certainly not somebody that would deliberately try and get you to visit by making stories up or anything like that. I'm not saying that a lot of these other outlets do, but often checking the veracity of a story is the very last thing that the likes of us do, not with the Stacey West, but with the Real EFL. A story's a story. Pump it out, get it out onto the next one. Bish, bash, bosh. But I didn't bish, bash, bosh on yesterday's story about Tom Shaw being the target for Notts County. Now, there's a reason I didn't straight away, and that's because I can see it. It's certainly the sort of link that you would come to, or you should expect. And I think the point that I wanted to make about on this video, before I tell you about discussions with club insiders, etc., that I have since had, is Tom Shaw being linked with Notts County is merely an example of how well viewed the Lincoln City staff and the Lincoln City achievement from last season is within football circles. Within Lincoln City fan circles, there's a bit of disappointment that we were 11th after finishing 7th. There's a bit of disappointment that we were 5th or 6th at Christmas and we ended up dropping away. There's a bit of disappointment we could have achieved more, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But within football circles, within the industry, people that are looking at the budget table as a metric, as a KPI, and you will have KPIs in your job, and we've got to remember that managing a football club is a job. We're supporters. So it's very different for us, but managing the club is a job, and managers and coaches have KPIs. And those KPIs, if they impress across the industry, will get noted, and bigger people come and try and poach you and take you away. So Tom Shaw being poached, not by a bigger club. You could argue Notts County historically are a bigger club. At the moment, probably similar sized clubs. You could argue with things like potential with fan base, etc. But for a club to want to go and take him as their manager isn't beyond the realms of possibility. It's not like when Michael Appleton was manager and someone might come in for David Kerslake in that second season. Wasn't going to happen. We underperformed, I believe, our budget that season. Certainly didn't do as we were expected. And a lot of our staff, as a result, probably weren't picked up. Joe Hutchinson's a classic example. Joe Hutchinson, when he was with us, I'm told, was instrumental in identifying Lewis Monsma, was a key driver in identifying a player called Trey Hume, who was at the EPC ready to sign for Lincoln City before Sunderland came in. He's now being linked with multi-million-pound moves, and he's a Premier League player. So Joe Hutchinson within the industry was well recognised. When a signing comes in at Lincoln, it's a just your signing, isn't it? That's all it is. And that's usually when it doesn't work out. And when it does work out, I don't know, some people think it's guesswork, but it's not. So Joe was well regarded within the industry, went to Grimsby for whatever reason. I'm not here to comment on that. You can't say letting him go, but there were obviously reasons at the time why we lost some staff like him and Ross Burberry, which I won't touch on. And now he's come back because he's been instrumental in picking up players at Grimsby and putting Grimsby's squad in a place where they're once again challenging for promotion. So that's how these things work. So it is obvious that the likes of Tom Shaw are going to be eyed by other clubs. Now, I have attempted to get to the bottom of this story a little. And the noises coming out of the football club from people that I've spoken to are there's nothing in it at the moment. They know nothing about it. Tom knows nothing about it. It is one of the stories doing the rounds. Now, when it comes to managers, quite often these stories are circulated in order to stimulate a betting market. Now, that's not necessarily the journalist, by the way. In fact, in this instance, it almost 100% won't be. But sometimes a betting company will feed a line because a market's stagnated, because there's such an outright favourite by a country mile, but things are being dragged on. They need to get that market going again. So a new name comes up. It's why sometimes if you look at betting markets, it'll be a shock name enters the fray for XX job, Middlesbrough, Plymouth, Hull. You know, it's always a shock name, a late surge. I think Sean Dyche was mentioned for one of the championship jobs the other day. 99 times out of 100, it's not going to be the case. It's just there to stimulate a betting market. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm not saying Tom's being used for that, because it has to be viable. You can't go, oh, well, they're just going to appoint, like Pep Guardiola, because nobody's going to put their money on that. But Tom Shaw, Notts County, you see it at 5s or 6s and think, if you're a Notts County fan, might be worth a 5 of that. Might be worth some money, that. So that's partly, or one of the reasons why I think these stories come out. And I remember doing an article, it was while Lincoln was searching for a manager, and I did an article on potential managers. And a friend of a friend worked at the time for Sky Bet. And I actually got a phone call from my friend saying, what is there in this? They need to know whether to add him to the betting market or not. Purely from a story that I had done on potential managers. So I think it's really interesting to bear that in mind, certainly around manager markets. Player markets, not so much, because there's no betting market on where Jordan Gabriel will go, or where Denver Hume will go, or where Paddy O'Connor will go. But the manager market's very different. And look, I've tried to play it. I'd thought I'd got a bit of inside information once about us trying to get a manager from abroad out of a contract. I was absolutely certain that therefore we were targeting Ian Foster. He was 33s, I think, at the time. Ooh, cheeky. And I was so tempted, but I don't know if I could get arrested for it. So I'm not Bradley Wood. So I didn't bother. But it's kind of, the manager market's a little bit open in that respect. However, as I said, industry-wide, Lincoln City are heavily, heavily respected. And the people behind the scenes are heavily respected. Now, I have it on absolutely solid authority that at least one member of our backroom staff could have moved to a Premier League club. Now, whether that's coach, medical, recruitment, whatever. Well, at least one of our members of staff could have moved to a Premier League club. This summer, a very senior member of our staff, backroom staff, could have moved to a championship club. What we're doing at the club are doing, I say we, people criticise me for being a club stooge. I say Lincoln, people criticise me for not referring to Lincoln City as we, which is amusing. You can only really refer to Lincoln City as we if you're being critical, as I'm sure Jimmy Walker found out recently, being perfectly acceptable. But what it seems to me that Lincoln are doing is actually building quietly behind the scenes, trying to battle and swim against the tide of overspending, and kind of it's almost the final days of this paradise, this world of excess that's going to come tumbling down around people's ears, and we want to be the team that it doesn't tumble around. We want to be the team that have got the processes in place and the robust financial structure that's able to exist in the brave new world, should the brave new world ever come. And you do that with good people. Now, we do lose people. There's no doubt about that. We lose ground staff. We lose commercial staff. Poor old Luke must be tearing his hair out at the turnover of commercial staff. But our commercial staff now work for the likes of former commercial staff, McLaren F1, and they've been through Premier League clubs like Man United and Liverpool. I mean, it's crazy where they go on to. So, again, I think it's interesting. But back on to Tom Shaw. And look, let's throw Chris Cohen into this, and let's throw Michael Skubala into this. Let's throw Scotty Fry into this. You know, these are people who within the football industry are becoming more and more respected. And, you know, if I say to you guys, what does Scott Fry do? And you might go, well, he's a goalkeeper coach. He comes up with set pieces. I know he does a hell of a lot more than that. For instance, I know that over the last couple of seasons, he's been on scouting missions because he was telling me at the presentation evening about how at some point he went out to Ljubljana to watch a player that had been identified. Who identified it? I don't know. Could well have been Joe Hutchinson with that kind of extreme obscurity. But again, what we do does get noticed, and stories that go out around the AI set piece recruitment in one of the red tops, I think it was earlier this week, only serve to strengthen that. So what the club are doing is being noticed in the industry. And the sad thing is, if I come on here and people will be, how many's watching this now? So 16 watching this now. Thank you very much. Over the course of the next 24, 48 hours, probably go up to 100, 150 maybe. And there'll be a lot of people who will hear me say what I'm about to say now and go, here he goes again. We're in such good shape. And it's hard sometimes for fans to see how respected and how well we're actually doing. And we did our live show with Michael last week and Jez and Liam and kind of said, was last season a success? They said, absolutely. And then they mentioned the budget table. It's not the sexiest thing, but it's something that's factual, which fans don't like to hear. We should be able to do better than the budget table until the team buys the league, by the way, and then they're spending too much money. Then budgets exist when it's working against you. But when you're outperforming your budget, but sitting in mediocrity, it's a lot harder, isn't it, to measure? But our staff are wanted. I don't know whether there's been approaches for Michael or not. My understanding is that we are very robustly protected, should that be the case. I would imagine somebody like Chris Cohen attracts weekly attention because he's been assistant head coaches in the Premier League and in the Championship, big addition. He's now sitting in our staff as part of a fully functioning team. There's no reason why Tom wouldn't. But the fact that these people have had approaches, and I'm not saying there's been specific approaches for Tom, specific approaches for Chris, but we were told at the live show that on eight different occasions, members of our backroom staff have been targeted, and they're going to be prominent members. They're going to be Kieran Walker's, Scott Fry's, Chris Cohen's, Tom Shaw's. The fact that they're being approached and are still at the club says a lot, I think, about the culture, the working culture behind the scenes now, compared to perhaps when the likes of Ross Burberry and Joe Hutchinson left first time. But then I'm just a sycophant, aren't I? I'm just somebody who tries to see the positive in things. And if I don't see the positive in things, I'm not quite as vocal about the negatives. And I hold my hands up to that. If I see a negative, I tend to be negative, certainly off camera. I tend to try and look for a silver lining in a cloud. Nobody will have heard me being over enthusiastic about the final days of Mark Kennedy's reign. And that's when I say final days, that's from the February to the October. But because I wasn't being outright sack him at the same time, I'm a sycophant. But I can live with that. But this is sycophantic. This is me saying, I think we've got a great backroom staff. I think it's going to be a tough summer. If I'm brutally honest, I don't think we need to make a lot of signings, but I think the key signings that we need to make, it's going to be really difficult operating. When you've got clubs like Bradford and Port Vale spending kind of upwards of £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 on players like Jordan Gable, who's played, 30, 40 games over the last 3 or 4 seasons. Huge risk. If it doesn't come off, you get criticised like we did for signing Tyler Walker. But if they go there and they play well, you get criticised for not taking the risk. Yeah, we're operating in a market where a Blackpool can go out and give a 4-year deal to Fraser Horsfield on what 8,000 a week, I'm led to believe, something like that, for 4 years, and he's in his late 20s. Oh, how do we stand that? How do you compete with that? You have to. You have to. And it starts by having good people, good leaders, and a good culture, because that's what then attracts players to you over and above the others. But I think it'll be a tough summer. I think we'll be linked to lots of players. I think you'll see those players go to other clubs at times. There'll be accusations that we've only got the dregs. There'll be accusations we've waited too long. There's no waiting. You know, I understand that we're speaking to targets on a regular basis, and there won't be any announcements in soon, from what I've heard. The market is volatile. I think there's probably a hope that it might steady down a little bit. You know, demands might come down as we get further in, but right now, the players that are moving are commanding big fees, and the clubs that are doing it are panicking a little bit. They want to get their business done early. They want to get their money in. You know, just as a suggestion, Sean Rowan to Huddersfield, we talk about money. My spies at the Huddersfield end have given me a figure, and that figure is significantly more than he was on at Lincoln, and we're not talking like half as much again. We're not even talking twice as much again. And that's no disrespect, Sean. Fair play to him. Go and earn your money. Go and earn your money. But we've got to try and operate within that. And I think holding on to those key people like Tom Shaw is important. But the headline, before I finish rambling, because you may have noticed I'm walking around in circles dead opposite my house, is that at this moment in time, there is no fear and no truth at all whatsoever, in certainly from the club's point of view, and from everybody connected to Tom's point of view, that Notts County are in for Tom Shaw. So at present, we will be keeping our highly talented, respected and amiable assistant head coach, and keeping that leadership team together. And I think that's only going to be great for Lincoln City. Thank you very much to the 16 people who have been watching this morning. Thank you if you're watching again online. Patrons, you may notice that we've started putting some Patreon-only content on the site. The big bits will always stay free for everybody, but it was my belief that... Charlie, quickly. Sorry, there's a car coming. It was my belief that patrons deserved some additional content, so I will be, over the course of time, dropping Patreon-only stuff as well. It's £2 a month if you want to join. The link's on the site. You know, it's a massive help, huge help. So there we go. I am now going to go back to writing clickbait articles and linking people with jobs that they're not linked with in order to stimulate betting markets. Up the imps.